Hi, everybody. My name is Marc Boorshtein. I'm the CTO of Tremolo Security, and we are going to be talking about zero standing privileges in Kubernetes. This is a case study, sometimes also called privileged access management or just-in-time provisioning. The idea is in a regulated environment, how do you manage access to privileged systems for a limited time? So let's talk about what privileged access management looks like outside of any specialized system. So in any given regulated enterprise, you'll have some kind of incident management process. And an incident doesn't necessarily mean something bad. It could be a scheduled change request. But the point is you've got to get a bunch of people together. They have to agree, okay, it's time to make a change. These are the systems we're going to make the change to. And we're going to log who approved it and what systems that goes to. That usually then feeds into something called a privileged access manager. The privileged access manager is responsible for unlocking an account that is linked to mine, but it's not my everyday account. It's not the account I check my email with. It's a different account. So like my username might be MLBIAM. My privileged account might have a bang in front of it. So it'd be bang MLBIAM. Different processes do this. But this privileged account manager knows how to hand me that account. So I'm an admin, I'm gonna start working on my cluster, the change window is open, I get my account, I go to get to Kubernetes. In this case, the environment's managed by OpenUnison, that's our open source project. I log into OpenUnison with my privileged access account, and I'm a member of a group in Active Directory. That group has a cluster role binding that is associated with via an internal group. So that's what that K8s cluster 01 is. So what that means is when I log in and I get a token, that token says I have a group called K8s cluster 01 because I'm a member of this Active Directory group. There's a corresponding cluster role binding inside of the cluster that then lets me do my job. So what are the limitations of this? Well, there are a couple of problems. Kubernetes clusters, like potato chips, you can't have just one. And as you know, there aren't that many people who know their way around Kubernetes, chances are you're managing multiple clusters. So I get these credentials, but I might have access to multiple clusters which are not in the change window. And so now I have this blast radius where those credentials are now available to use against other clusters, even though they weren't part of the change. So it's called blast radius. From a non-technical side, from a compliance standpoint, we just went through all this process to define how we're gonna manage these clusters during a change window, and now we're giving access to clusters that aren't in the change window. So that actually breaks all your compliance that you just went through. And this has never happened to me personally, but allegedly, if you have access to multiple clusters during a change window, you might accidentally do work on the wrong cluster. Maybe. There's also a scale problem, because think about it. This isn't really that big of a deal on a single cluster. I could create a controller that creates a cluster role binding at the right time. That would get me into the cluster during the change window. This organization, it's a top 5 financial institution. They have 260 multi-tenant clusters around the world. And these are large clusters. There's about 15,000 namespaces. It's about 1-to-1 to a tenant. Not necessarily 1-to-1, but close enough. And these are the type of systems that when they go down, the regulators and the auditors get involved. So these are not tiny systems. And we're talking about billions of dollars that get processed. So there's a problem in this. The CIO is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and not for a good reason. So we'd like to avoid that. So how'd we fix it? How'd we get them through this? So OpenUnison is an identity management solution, which means we have a lot of flexibility on what we do. So we said, okay, we need to integrate with your incident management system, and we need to do it in such a way that is transparent to Kubernetes. So we're gonna start with the privileged login. Now, the PAM system is still there. You're using your privileged access account. We just took it out to make the graphic a little easier. So the idea here is you log into OpenUnison just as before, and OpenUnison, the number 1, checks to see, okay, what clusters do you potentially have access to. So not necessarily the ones that you already have access to, but potentially. And we get that information from Active Directory. We then ask the user to go to a form and say, hey, look, pick which cluster you want to have access to, and then give us an incident number. That incident number is then handed off to a proxy service. So this was one of the customer's ideas, and it worked really well, where they said, okay, we're not gonna have you talk directly to our incident management system because there is a lot of red tape in that. We're gonna talk to it, but we're gonna give you a proxy service that you can connect to. So really great case study in the beauty of contract-based development. We agreed on an API. It worked perfectly. So we hand them an incident. That incident is then verified against the user and the cluster. They hand us back a list of tasks, and when those tasks expire, the user chooses which task they're going to do work on. And once they hit submit, we add them to a group inside of Open Unison. This is the group that's bound to the cluster role buying. So the user doesn't actually have authorization to use that cluster until this is submitted. Of course, we're doing data validation, making sure along the way that you're not abusing the API. So we gotta put some security controls around this. So the first is that we always use short-lived tokens, whether it's privileged access or not. So these tokens are only good for 1 to 2 minutes. The attacker gets their hands on it. By the time they get it, they realize what they have. Token's expired. So question once came up, why not, if it's a 4-hour window, hand them a 4-hour token. The problem is you lose that token, it's good for 4 hours. There's no revocation. There's no way to say, oh, just ignore this token. That's it, you're done. So this way, making sure that you have a fresh token. At the end of the privileged access session, we kill all of your sessions. So that means if your account has been locked, now you can no longer use it. Additionally, you want to make sure that you're not gaining access to anything outside the window. So if somebody were to add you to that privileged access group outside of a window, we're constantly looking at it and say, hey, you don't have this access right now. We're going to deprovision you. That gets fed into their SIEM. That SIEM sends up an alert that something bad happened. And then finally, break glass. What happens if that service is not available and there's an incident? You can't be in a situation where cluster admins can't access the system because the incident system or the incident proxy or any of the millions of things that can go wrong have happened. So we provide them a way where the security team can log into Open Unison, enable break glass, and that changes the connection. So instead of connecting it to the internal group, it connects it directly to the AD group. So now anybody that potentially does have access will have access. So that's, of course, something you only want to do in emergency. It generates it generates flags inside of the SIEM. It raises all sorts of alarm bells. It's not something to do every day, but yeah, operations have to continue if one piece fails. You can't have a single point of failure. Moving beyond cluster admin, they're very interested in looking at service counts and pipelines. Namespace administrators, if these were VMs, they would have to also get incident management, so they want to look at expanding this to namespace administrators for their tenants, and a bit more fine-grained break glass, being able to say, okay, we're only going to do break glass for these clusters right now. This is all open source, so you get to try it for yourself. So Open Unison is our identity provider. That lets you do SSO into any Kubernetes cluster, no database required. Namespace as a service is built on top of that, also open source, gives you the ability to carve up your cluster into multiple tenants. And then finally, privileged access is built on top of that. So we give you an easy way to do manual integration and then integrate it into your incident management service, because that's a business process going to be different for every single organization. Finally, I'm the co-author of Kubernetes and Enterprise Guide. That's the link if you'd like to buy the book, where we talk about topics like this. Additionally, if you want to head over to Loft Labs booth, I'm signing copies for the rest of the afternoon. And I'll be around if you want to talk. Thanks, everybody.